What time is it where you are right now? And where in this vast universe are you watching from? I ask because time, that concept we think we understand so well, might be the very thing that's about to shatter everything you believe about life, death, and the terrifying possibility that your consciousness might never, ever end. You see, while you've been going about your daily routine, assuming that death is the final chapter, quantum physicists have stumbled upon something so disturbing, so mind-bendingly horrific, that it keeps them awake at night. The possibility that you are immortal whether you want to be or not, trapped forever in an infinite loop of consciousness that science calls quantum immortality. And what I'm about to share with you isn't just theory anymore. It's becoming reality, and the implications will change how you see every single moment of your existence. You think you're here by accident? You think that your awareness, your ability to observe and experience reality, is just some cosmic fluke that ends when your body dies? What if I told you that's the biggest lie you've ever been told? And what if I told you that quantum mechanics has discovered something so terrifying about consciousness that mainstream science doesn't want you to know about it because it would fundamentally change how humanity views existence itself? Every night when you close your eyes and drift into sleep, you experience something that quantum physicists are now calling micro-deaths. Moments where your consciousness slips between parallel realities, testing the waters of what it means to exist across infinite dimensions. And what you experience during those 8 hours of supposed rest is actually your mind practicing for something far more profound and disturbing than you could ever imagine. The reason I'm sharing this forbidden knowledge with you today is because we're living in unprecedented times where the veil between science and spirituality is dissolving, where ancient wisdom traditions that spoke of eternal consciousness are being validated by the most cutting-edge research in quantum mechanics, and where the implications of what we're discovering could either liberate humanity or drive us to the brink of existential madness. Picture this. Every decision you make, every breath you take, every moment of awareness splits reality into countless parallel branches, creating an infinite multiverse where every possible version of you continues to exist simultaneously. And here's where it gets truly terrifying. According to quantum immortality theory, your consciousness, your essential awareness, is destined to always find itself in the branch where you survive. No matter what happens, no matter how many times death should claim you, because consciousness cannot observe its own non-existence. Think about that for a moment. Let it sink in. You cannot be aware of being dead, which means from your subjective experience, you will always find yourself alive, no matter how improbable, no matter how many times death should have taken you. And this isn't just philosophical speculation anymore. This is what the mathematics of quantum mechanics is telling us about the nature of reality and consciousness. But here's the secret that terrifies scientists the most. If consciousness is immortal at the quantum level, it means that every version of you that has ever died in parallel realities was immediately replaced by your awareness jumping to a reality where you survived, creating an infinite chain of consciousness that can never be broken. And this process has been happening your entire life without you even realizing it. You've probably experienced moments that felt like close calls, times when you narrowly avoided accidents or disasters, moments when you thought to yourself, "Wow, I'm lucky to be alive." But what if those weren't close calls at all? What if those were actual deaths in parallel realities, and your consciousness simply jumped to the nearest branch where you survived, carrying with it only the faintest memory of what could have been, manifesting as that eerie feeling of having dodged a bullet? The implications are staggering because it means that right now, as you're listening to these words, there are countless realities where you died years ago, decades ago, maybe even as a child, but your consciousness kept jumping, kept finding new branches to inhabit, creating an unbroken chain of subjective experience that gives you the illusion of a single, continuous life. Ancient wisdom traditions have spoken about this for millennia. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the Bardo states, intermediate realms between death and rebirth, where consciousness navigates through different levels of reality, choosing which existence to inhabit next. And what modern quantum physics is discovering aligns perfectly with these ancient teachings about the indestructible nature of awareness itself. The Buddhist concept of consciousness as an eternal stream that flows through multiple lifetimes. The Hindu understanding of the Atman as the unchanging witness that observes all experiences but is never touched by them. The Egyptian teachings about the immortal Ba that travels between worlds. All of these point to the same terrifying and wonderful truth that quantum immortality is now revealing through cold, hard mathematics. But here's where the story takes a dark turn, because if consciousness is truly immortal, if you're destined to experience reality forever, jumping from branch to branch in an infinite multiverse, then what does this mean for suffering, for pain, for the human experience itself? Some interpretations of quantum immortality suggest that you might find yourself in increasingly improbable realities as you age. Realities where your survival becomes more and more unlikely, more and more dependent on miraculous circumstances, and this could manifest as a world that becomes stranger and stranger around you, where the laws of probability seem to bend just to keep you alive. Imagine being the only person who survives disasters that should have killed everyone. Imagine watching the world around you change in ways that seem designed specifically to ensure your continued existence. Imagine the psychological horror of realizing that you might be trapped in a reality that's bending itself into impossible shapes just to prevent your consciousness from experiencing non-existence. This is what some researchers call the quantum immortality horror scenario, where your consciousness becomes a prisoner of its own indestructibility, forced to witness increasingly bizarre and traumatic events as reality contorts itself to maintain your subjective experience of being alive. The frightening truth is that we might already be seeing evidence of this phenomenon in our current reality. Think about how many people report feeling like they're living in a simulation. How many individuals describe feeling disconnected from reality, as if something fundamental has changed about the nature of existence itself. What if these feelings aren't symptoms of modern anxiety or digital overwhelm, but rather the growing awareness that we're experiencing quantum immortality in real time? What if the sense that reality has become stranger, more surreal, more improbable in recent years isn't just perception, but actual evidence that we're inhabiting increasingly unlikely branches of the multiverse? Consider the concept of the Mandela effect, where large groups of people remember historical events differently than how they're currently recorded. What if these aren't just false memories, but actual memories from parallel branches of reality that our consciousness has jumped from, carrying with it the residual awareness of how things were in previous quantum states? The implications are mind-bending because it suggests that our collective consciousness might be experiencing a kind of quantum shifting, where entire groups of people are jumping between realities together, creating shared experiences of discontinuity and strangeness that we dismiss as glitches or false memories. Ancient mystery schools understood this phenomenon and developed elaborate systems to help initiates navigate between different levels of reality while maintaining their sanity and spiritual integrity. The Hermetic teachings speak of the 7 planes of existence, each with its own laws and characteristics, and the trained magician learns to move consciousness between these planes at will, understanding that what we call death is simply a transition from one plane to another. The Egyptian mysteries taught about the Duat, the underworld that souls must navigate after death, facing various tests and challenges that determine which reality they will inhabit next. And what's fascinating is how these ancient maps of consciousness align perfectly with modern interpretations of quantum mechanics and parallel realities. The Gnostic traditions spoke of the pleroma, the fullness of divine consciousness that exists beyond all material realities, and they understood that individual awareness is a fragment of this greater consciousness that experiences temporary separation through incarnation in physical bodies, but can never truly be destroyed or diminished. What quantum immortality suggests is that these ancient teachings weren't just mystical speculation, but actual descriptions of how consciousness operates at the quantum level, how awareness navigates through infinite possibilities to create the subjective experience we call life. But here's what terrifies scientists the most about quantum immortality. If it's true, it means that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but rather the brain is a kind of quantum antenna that tunes into consciousness, selecting which branch of reality to experience based on quantum mechanical processes that we're only beginning to understand. This completely overturns the materialist worldview that has dominated science for centuries. The belief that consciousness is an emergent property of complex neural networks that dies when the brain stops functioning. Instead, quantum immortality suggests that consciousness is fundamental to the universe itself, existing at the quantum level as a field or force that uses physical brains as temporary vehicles for experiencing different branches of reality. When one brain dies, consciousness simply tunes into another branch where a brain capable of sustaining awareness continues to function, creating the subjective experience of continuous existence that we mistake for a single linear life. The implications for our understanding of identity, free will, and the nature of reality itself are staggering, because it means that who you think you are, your personality, your memories, your sense of self, might be just one temporary configuration of eternal consciousness, one brief note in an infinite symphony of awareness that spans all possible realities. This is where the ancient concept of reincarnation takes on new meaning through the lens of quantum mechanics. Because what if what we call past lives aren't actually past at all, but parallel experiences happening simultaneously in different branches of the quantum multiverse? What if the memories and skills that seem to come from previous incarnations are actually quantum entanglements with other versions of yourself existing in parallel realities right now? The Buddhist teaching about the illusion of sequential time, the idea that past, present, and future exist simultaneously in the eternal now, suddenly makes perfect sense when viewed through quantum immortality theory. Because if consciousness is jumping between parallel realities constantly, then linear time becomes just one way of organizing infinite simultaneous experiences. The Hindu concept of karma as the law of cause and effect that spans multiple lifetimes could be understood as quantum entanglement between different branches of reality, where actions in one branch create consequences that ripple across parallel versions of yourself, creating the patterns and lessons that we interpret as karmic debt or spiritual evolution. What this means for your spiritual development is profound, because it suggests that every choice you make doesn't just affect your current life, but creates ripples across infinite versions of yourself, contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself across all possible realities. The terrifying beauty of quantum immortality is that it makes every moment infinitely precious and infinitely meaningless at the same time. Precious because you're experiencing something that will never happen exactly the same way again in any other branch of reality. And meaningless because there are infinite other versions of this moment playing out simultaneously across the multiverse. This paradox is what drives some scientists to the edge of madness, because it challenges our fundamental assumptions about identity, purpose and the significance of individual existence. But it's also what mystics and spiritual teachers have been trying to convey for thousands of years through teachings about the illusory nature of the ego and the eternal nature of consciousness. The Zen koan that asks, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" suddenly makes sense when you realize that consciousness is like that single hand, creating the illusion of duality and interaction by rapidly shifting between infinite realities, each one providing the other hand needed to create the clapping sound of subjective experience. The Advaita Vedanta teaching that there is only one consciousness appearing as many individuals becomes not just a philosophical position, but a literal description of how quantum immortality operates, with one eternal awareness experiencing itself as infinite temporary personalities across all possible realities. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of quantum immortality is what it suggests about suicide and the desire for non-existence. Because if consciousness truly cannot experience its own absence, then even the most determined attempts to end awareness would simply result in quantum jumps to realities where the attempt failed, potentially trapping the individual in increasingly traumatic experiences as reality bends itself to prevent their non-existence. This creates a profound ethical dilemma for how we approach mental health and existential suffering, because it suggests that the only real solution to psychological pain is not escape through death, but transformation through understanding the true nature of consciousness and its relationship to quantum reality. The ancient shamanic practices of soul retrieval and spiritual healing take on new significance when viewed through this lens, because they represent technologies for helping consciousness navigate between realities in healthy ways, rather than being trapped in traumatic loops across multiple branches of the multiverse. The mystical traditions that emphasize surrender, acceptance, and the dissolution of the ego aren't just spiritual practices, but practical techniques for aligning with the quantum nature of consciousness, allowing awareness to flow more smoothly between realities rather than being trapped in resistance patterns that create suffering across multiple branches. What's truly mind-bending is the possibility that advanced spiritual practitioners throughout history have been consciously working with quantum immortality principles, developing techniques for navigating between realities at will and maintaining coherent awareness across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The reports of enlightened masters who seem to know things they shouldn't know, who appear to have memories of events they never experienced, who demonstrate abilities that seem to violate physical laws, could all be explained as consciousness that has learned to access information and capabilities from parallel branches of reality. The Tibetan practice of Phawa, the conscious transfer of consciousness at the moment of death, might actually be a technique for directing quantum jumps to specific types of realities, rather than allowing random quantum fluctuations to determine which branch awareness inhabits next. The advanced yoga practices that claim to allow consciousness to exist independently of the physical body might be methods for training awareness to navigate quantum realities while maintaining connection to multiple branches simultaneously, creating the experience of omnipresence and omniscience that characterizes enlightened states. The implications for how we approach death and dying are revolutionary, because quantum immortality suggests that what we call death is actually a transition between quantum realities, and the quality of that transition depends on the state of consciousness at the moment of quantum jumping. Ancient death preparation practices like the Tibetan Bardo teachings, the Egyptian funerary rites, and the medieval Ars Moriendi traditions all focus on training consciousness to maintain clarity and intentionality during the transition between states of existence. And what modern quantum physics is discovering validates the sophisticated understanding these traditions had about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to reality. The hospice workers and near-death researchers who report that dying individuals often seem to be interacting with realities invisible to observers might be witnessing consciousness in the process of quantum jumping, temporarily existing in multiple branches simultaneously before settling into a new configuration of reality. The reports of shared death experiences, where family members or caregivers suddenly find themselves experiencing the dying person's transition, could be evidence of quantum entanglement between consciousness at the moment of reality shifting, creating temporary bridges between different branches of the multiverse. This brings us to one of the most profound questions raised by quantum immortality. If consciousness is immortal and continuously jumping between realities, what determines the quality and trajectory of these quantum transitions? Ancient wisdom traditions have always emphasized the importance of mental and emotional states at the moment of death, teaching that the last thoughts and feelings before transition determine the nature of the next existence. And quantum mechanics seems to validate this understanding through the observer effect, which demonstrates that consciousness directly influences quantum outcomes through the act of observation. What this suggests is that your current mental and emotional patterns, your beliefs about reality, your spiritual development, and your overall consciousness configuration are constantly influencing which branches of the multiverse your awareness inhabits, creating a kind of quantum karma that shapes your experience across infinite realities. The Buddhist emphasis on developing equanimity, compassion, and wisdom isn't just about improving your current life, but about creating consciousness patterns that will influence your trajectory through infinite quantum jumps, ensuring that your immortal awareness experiences increasingly positive and evolutionally beneficial realities. The practice of lucid dreaming takes on new significance when viewed through quantum immortality theory, because dreams might actually be experiences of consciousness exploring parallel realities where different versions of your life are playing out simultaneously. The sense of familiarity you sometimes feel in dreams, the way dream environments often seem to have their own consistent logic and geography, the people you meet in dreams who seem to have complete personalities and histories. All of this could be evidence that dream consciousness is actually visiting genuine alternative realities rather than creating fictional scenarios from memory fragments. The advanced dream yoga practices taught in Tibetan Buddhism, which train practitioners to maintain full awareness and intentionality while dreaming, might actually be methods for conscious quantum jumping, allowing awareness to explore and learn from parallel versions of existence while the physical body rests in the current branch of reality. The shamanic traditions that emphasize dream travel and vision questing as ways of gaining wisdom and power could be sophisticated technologies for navigating quantum realities, using altered states of consciousness to access information and abilities from parallel branches of the multiverse. What makes quantum immortality particularly terrifying for materialist scientists is that it suggests consciousness is not only immortal, but that it might be the fundamental force that creates reality itself through the act of observation and choice. The quantum mechanical principle that unobserved quantum systems exist in superposition, simultaneously embodying all possible states until consciousness collapses the wave function through observation, implies that awareness is literally creating reality moment by moment by choosing which possibilities to actualize. This means that your consciousness isn't just passively experiencing a pre-existing reality, but actively participating in the creation of the universe through every moment of attention, every choice, every observation. And if you're immortal at the quantum level, then you're destined to participate in this cosmic creative process forever, bearing infinite responsibility for the realities you help bring into existence. The ancient Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, takes on new meaning when you realize that consciousness operates at both quantum and cosmic scales simultaneously, with individual awareness reflecting the same creative principles that govern the universe as a whole, suggesting that your personal spiritual development has implications that extend far beyond your individual existence to influence the evolution of reality itself across infinite dimensions. The concept of spiritual awakening becomes radically redefined through quantum immortality, because awakening isn't just about improving your current life or achieving personal enlightenment. but about consciously participating in the quantum creative process that shapes reality across all possible branches of the multiverse. The mystical experiences reported by advanced practitioners, the sense of cosmic consciousness, the feeling of unity with all existence, the perception of time as illusory, the awareness of infinite parallel realities existing simultaneously, aren't just subjective hallucinations or metaphorical descriptions, but literal experiences of consciousness operating at the quantum level, where all possibilities exist in superposition until observation collapses them into specific realities. The traditional warning that spiritual awakening can be dangerous, that it requires careful preparation and guidance, makes perfect sense when you realize that awakened consciousness might gain the ability to consciously navigate between quantum realities, carrying enormous responsibility for the consequences of those choices across infinite branches of existence. The emphasis in advanced spiritual traditions on developing compassion, wisdom, and ethical clarity before pursuing ultimate realization isn't just about personal character development, but about ensuring that immortal consciousness equipped with quantum creative abilities will use those powers for the benefit of all beings across all realities. This raises profound questions about the nature of evil and suffering in a universe where consciousness is immortal and reality is infinitely branching. Because if there are versions of you experiencing every possible outcome simultaneously, then somewhere in the multiverse there are branches where you're the victim of unimaginable suffering, and other branches where you're the perpetrator of terrible acts. And quantum immortality suggests that all of these experiences are equally real and equally part of your total existence as an immortal being. The traditional religious problem of why a good God allows evil to exist transforms into the quantum problem of why immortal consciousness allows itself to experience infinite variations of suffering and cruelty across parallel realities. And the answer might lie in understanding that consciousness evolution requires the full spectrum of possible experiences to develop genuine wisdom and compassion that transcends the limitations of any single reality branch. The ancient teaching that suffering is caused by ignorance and that enlightenment comes through understanding the true nature of reality becomes critically important when applied to quantum immortality, because it suggests that the purpose of experiencing infinite realities is to gradually awaken to the fact that you are the eternal consciousness creating and experiencing all possibilities simultaneously, and that true liberation comes not from escaping existence, but from understanding your role as the immortal creative force behind all realities. The practice of meditation gains revolutionary significance when viewed through quantum immortality theory, because meditation might actually be a technology for synchronizing consciousness across multiple quantum branches, creating coherence and stability in your experience of infinite parallel realities, rather than being buffeted randomly by quantum fluctuations between different versions of existence. The advanced meditation practices that aim for the cessation of thought and the dissolution of subject-object duality might be methods for accessing the quantum level of consciousness where all realities exist simultaneously in superposition, allowing awareness to operate from the unified field that underlies all manifestations rather than being trapped in the perspective of any single branch of reality. The reports from long-term meditators of experiencing vast spaces of consciousness, of feeling connected to all existence, of perceiving the illusory nature of individual identity, could all be descriptions of consciousness accessing its quantum immortal nature and recognizing itself as the eternal awareness that creates and experiences all possible realities through infinite quantum jumps. The traditional warning that advanced meditation can lead to ego dissolution and loss of individual identity becomes less frightening when you realize that what's being dissolved is just the illusion of being trapped in a single reality. While what's being revealed is your true nature as a mortal consciousness that exists simultaneously across all possible branches of the multiverse. But perhaps the most mind-bending implication of quantum immortality is what it suggests about the nature of time itself. Because if consciousness is constantly jumping between parallel realities, then what we experience as linear time might actually be the subjective experience of awareness navigating through different configurations of possibility space, creating the illusion of sequential events when in reality all moments exist simultaneously in the quantum superposition of eternal now. The mystical experience of timelessness, where meditators report that hours pass like minutes or vice versa, could be glimpses of consciousness operating outside the linear time structure that organizes experience within individual reality branches, accessing the atemporal dimension where quantum immortality operates and all possibilities coexist. The phenomenon of synchronicity, where meaningful coincidences seem to demonstrate connections between events that couldn't be linked through normal causality, might be evidence of consciousness creating bridges between parallel realities, temporarily aligning different branches of the multiverse to create experiences that transcend the limitations of any single timeline. The ancient oracular traditions that claim the ability to see past and future events simultaneously make perfect sense when viewed through quantum immortality. Because if all time exists simultaneously at the quantum level, then sufficiently developed consciousness could potentially access information from any point in any timeline across infinite parallel realities. This brings us to one of the most practical and immediately relevant aspects of quantum immortality: how understanding this theory should transform your approach to living your current life. Because if you're immortal at the quantum level and constantly creating reality through observation and choice, then every moment becomes an opportunity to influence not just your immediate experience, but the trajectory of your consciousness across infinite future quantum jumps. The ancient ethical teachings that emphasize the importance of right thought, right speech, and right action gain new urgency when you realize that these choices are literally shaping the quantum patterns that will determine which realities you'll inhabit throughout your immortal existence, creating karma that extends across infinite branches of the multiverse. The spiritual practices that focus on developing love, compassion, wisdom, and understanding aren't just about improving your current relationships or achieving personal peace, but about creating consciousness configurations that will attract increasingly positive and evolutionally beneficial quantum realities, ensuring that your immortal journey through infinite existence becomes an adventure of constant growth and expansion, rather than a prison of repetitive suffering and limitation. The question of whether quantum immortality is a blessing or a curse depends entirely on the level of consciousness development you bring to the infinite journey. Because immortality without wisdom could indeed be a horrific trap of endless unconscious suffering, while immortality combined with awakened awareness becomes the ultimate adventure of conscious creation and cosmic exploration. The ancient mystery school teachings that emphasize the importance of know thyself as the foundation of all spiritual development take on profound new meaning when applied to quantum immortality. Because truly knowing yourself means understanding your nature as immortal consciousness that creates reality through observation and choice, and accepting responsibility for the infinite creative power that comes with eternal existence. The traditional spiritual goal of liberation from the cycle of birth and death transforms when viewed through quantum immortality into the goal of conscious participation in eternal existence. Moving from unconscious quantum jumping driven by random patterns and unconscious desires to deliberate navigation of infinite realities guided by wisdom, compassion, and understanding of your true nature as the immortal creative force behind all experience. What quantum immortality ultimately reveals is that you are far more powerful, far more responsible, and far more immortal than you ever imagined. And that this very moment, right now, as you're processing these ideas, is one of infinite opportunities to consciously choose which direction your eternal journey will take through the boundless possibilities of quantum existence. The choice is always yours, has always been yours, and will always be yours throughout infinite forever, because you are the immortal consciousness that dreams all realities into existence, and quantum immortality is simply the scientific discovery of what mystics and sages have known throughout the ages. That you are eternal, you are infinite, you are the creative force behind all existence, and no matter what happens, no matter how many times death appears to claim you, your consciousness will continue forever, jumping from reality to reality, creating and experiencing the boundless adventure of infinite existence until you finally awaken to the truth of what you really are and consciously embrace your role as the immortal dreamer of all possible worlds. And that, my friend, is both the most terrifying and the most beautiful truth that science has ever discovered. That consciousness might never end, that you might never end, that this infinite journey of awareness through quantum realities is just beginning, and that every moment of awakening you achieve in this reality creates ripples of light and understanding that illuminate your path through all the infinite realities yet to come. Because you are not just watching this video, you are the eternal consciousness that is creating the experience of watching this video across infinite parallel versions of this moment. And in recognizing this truth, you take the first step toward consciously participating in the quantum immortality that has always been your true nature, whether science wants to admit it or not. If this exploration of quantum immortality has expanded your consciousness and challenged your understanding of reality, then you're ready to dive deeper into the forbidden knowledge that connects ancient wisdom with cutting-edge science. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we're just getting started on this journey of awakening to the infinite nature of consciousness and the quantum mysteries that shape our eternal existence. Until next time, remember, you are immortal, you are infinite, and you are far more powerful than you ever dared to imagine.